The old radio equipment in the deep space monitoring station crackled to life at 3 in the morning. Tom Brady rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the ancient machine that most people had forgotten existed. The signal came from somewhere far, beyond human space, weak and broken like a dying whisper. Tom worked alone on the night shift at Station Omega, a tiny outpost that watched for signals from the depths of space. Most nights, nothing happened. He spent his time reading books and drinking coffee while the computers listened for messages that never came. Tonight was different. The strange sounds from the radio made him sit up straight. He had never heard anything like it before. The signal faded in and out, but there was something about it that made his skin crawl. It sounded desperate. It sounded like someone was crying for help. Tom recorded the signal and fed it into the translation computer. The machine was old, but still worked, well enough to break down alien languages. Most of the time, it just found natural radio waves from stars and planets. This time, the screen lit up with words that made Tom's blood turn cold. "Help us, please. They come from the dark. Our children are dying. We have no weapons. Please, show mercy." The message repeated over and over, getting weaker each time. Tom checked the source location and felt his heart race. The signal came from the Tylon sector, home to a peaceful alien race called the Relac. Tom had studied them in school. They were known throughout the galaxy as gentle artists and philosophers who had never fought a war. Tom immediately called his supervisor, then his supervisor's supervisor, then kept calling until he reached someone important enough to make decisions. Within an hour, Admiral Patricia Walsh was staring at the same message on her command screen 300 light-years away. Walsh had gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. She commanded the Earth Defense Fleet from her office on Luna Station, and she took her job very seriously. The message from the Relac troubled her deeply. These aliens were known for being peaceful. If they were asking for help, something terrible must be happening. "How old is this signal?" Walsh asked her communications officer. "At least 6 months, maybe 7. It took a long time to reach us." Walsh studied the star charts on her screen. The Tylon sector was far from Earth, but not too far for her ships to reach. The Relac had always been friendly to humans, even if they thought humans were too violent. They had shared their art and music with Earth, asking for nothing in return. "What? Do we know about threats in that area?" Walsh asked. Her intelligence officer pulled up files on his computer. "There have been reports of something called the Hive moving through that region. They are a species that consumes entire planets. They strip away all life and use it to build more ships." Walsh felt sick. The Hive was one of the worst threats in known space. They moved like a plague of insects, destroying everything in their path. Most civilized species ran when they heard the Hive was coming. The peaceful Rylock would have no chance against them. The Relac asked for mercy, the communications officer said quietly. "Not military help, just mercy." Walsh looked at the message again. The aliens were so gentle that even when facing extinction, they could not bring themselves to ask for weapons or soldiers. They believed that someone would save them out of pure kindness. Walsh made her decision quickly. "Send orders to all fleet commanders. I want every available ship ready to move within 12 hours. Admiral, the Defense Council will need to approve any major military action," her aide reminded her. "The Council can approve it while we are traveling," Walsh said firmly. "If the Relac are asking for mercy, then that is exactly what they will get. It just might not be the kind they expected." Walsh began calling her ship commanders one by one. Each captain asked the same questions. Why were they mobilizing the entire fleet for aliens who lived so far away? Why risk human lives for people who had nothing to offer Earth in return? Walsh gave them all the same answer. Because it is the right thing to do. The human fleet began gathering at the edge of Earth's solar system. 53 ships of different sizes came together in formation. There were small, fast destroyers, built for hunting enemy ships. There were heavy cruisers designed to fight other large vessels. At the center of the fleet was the massive dreadnought Indomitable, Walsh's flagship that carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Each ship was packed with weapons that peaceful species could not imagine building. Humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of war because their home planet had tried to kill them every single day. Earth was a dangerous world full of predators, diseases, and natural disasters. Only the strongest and smartest humans had survived long enough to reach the stars. Other alien races called Earth a death world and its people death worlders. They thought humans were barely civilized barbarians who solved every problem with violence. They were not entirely wrong, but they did not understand the full truth. Humans had learned to be violent because their world demanded it. But they had also learned to protect the weak and defend the innocent. When faced with bullies and predators, humans did not run or hide. They fought back with everything they had. The Relac message played on every ship as the fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. The desperate voices of dying aliens reminded every human sailor why they were making this journey. Somewhere, in the darkness of space, peaceful people were suffering and dying while waiting for mercy that might never come. Walsh stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked out at the stars. In a few hours, her fleet would begin the long journey to the Tylon sector. They might arrive too late to save anyone. They might face an enemy too powerful to defeat, but they would try anyway, because that is what humans did. All ships report. "Ready for jump," her navigation officer announced. Walsh took a deep breath and gave the order that would change everything. "Take us to the Tylon sector, maximum speed." The human fleet disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying hope to the desperate and a promise of protection to the innocent. The Relac had called for mercy, and the Death Worlders were coming to answer. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Tylon system after 6 days of hard travel. What they found there was worse than anyone had imagined. The beautiful blue-green world that had once been home to 800 million Relac was now a burning red ball of destruction. Captain Maria Santos commanded the destroyer Lightning, one of the fastest ships in the human fleet. Her job was to scout ahead and gather information before the main fleet arrived. What her sensors showed made her feel sick to her stomach. "Mother of God," whispered her sensor operator, a young man named David who had never seen real combat before. "What happened to that planet?" Santos looked at the readings on her screen. The Relac homeworld was covered in fires that burned so hot they could be seen from space. The elegant crystal cities that had taken thousands of years to grow were melting like ice in summer. Thick clouds of smoke and ash blocked out the sun. "Hive attack," Santos said grimly. "They strip everything living from a planet and turn it into fuel for their war machine." But the destruction on the planet was not the worst thing they found. Moving through the system like giant insects were the ships of the Hive themselves. Santos counted 47 vessels of different sizes, all of them looking more like living creatures than machines. The Hive ships had smooth curves and organic lines that twisted and flowed like the bodies of sea creatures. They were covered in what looked like thick skin instead of metal armor. Some were small and fast like sharks. Others were huge and slow like whales. All of them moved with the deadly grace of predators. "Admiral Walsh, this is Santos. We have found the enemy. Sending you our sensor data now." The information flowed from Santos's ship to the flagship Indomitable, where Admiral Walsh studied the tactical situation. The Hive fleet was spread throughout the system, with some ships still attacking the planet while others patrolled the outer edges. "Captain Santos, what about survivors?" Walsh asked over the radio. Santos adjusted her sensors to look for any sign of Relac ships trying to escape. What she found broke her heart. Scattered throughout the system were the elegant vessels of the Relac, but most of them were dead hulks floating in space. A few were still trying to reach safety, but Hive interceptors hunted them down one by one. I see maybe 20 relax ships still moving, Santos reported. But they are being hunted. The hive is picking them off like wolves chasing sheep. Walsh felt anger building in her chest as she watched the tactical display update. The Relac were artists and philosophers who had built their ships for beauty, not war. Their vessels looked like works of art, all flowing lines and graceful curves. They had no weapons and no armor to speak of. All ships. This is Admiral Walsh. Prepare for combat. We are going to show these monsters what human mercy looks like. The full human fleet appeared in the system like avenging angels. 53. Warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons powered up and ready for battle. Each ship bristled with guns, missiles, and defensive systems that represented centuries of human military engineering. The difference between human and Relac ships was striking. Where Relac vessels were beautiful and peaceful, human ships were built for one purpose only, to fight and win. They had thick armor, powerful shields, and enough firepower to destroy cities. They looked exactly like what they were, weapons of war built by a species that had clawed its way off a death world. Through violence and determination, Santos watched as the hive ships began to react to the human fleet. The alien vessels moved like a swarm of insects that had suddenly noticed a threat. They turned away from hunting the helpless Relac survivors and began forming up to face this new enemy. Hive vessels. This is Admiral Walsh of the United Earth. Defense Force! The Admiral's voice boomed across all radio frequencies. You will stop your attack immediately and leave this system. This is your only warning. The response came not in words, but in action. The hive ships began accelerating toward the human fleet like a wave of living death. They moved in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. They are not interested in talking, Walsh said calmly to her bridge crew. All ships, you are free to engage. Show them how humans fight. The first hive ship to reach human lines was a medium-sized vessel that looked like a giant wasp. It moved faster than anything that size should have been able to, twisting and turning through space as it closed the distance to Captain Rex Thompson's cruiser Phoenix. Thompson had fought pirates and raiders throughout his career, but he had never faced anything like this. The hive ship seemed to dance through space, avoiding his targeting computers with impossible grace. Its living armor shifted and changed color as it moved, making it hard for his weapons to lock on. This thing is too fast. Thompson's weapons. Officer reported. I cannot get a clean shot. Then we do this the old-fashioned way, Thompson replied. He switched his main guns to manual control and aimed by instinct rather than computer. When the hive ship swept past his starboard side, Thompson fired everything he had. The plasma cannons that had been designed to break apart asteroids hit the living ship with the force of a small star. The hive vessel's organic armor, which had evolved to resist most energy weapons, simply vaporized under the intense heat. The alien ship died in a ball of superheated gas. Good kill, Phoenix, Admiral Walsh said over the radio. All ships, target their largest vessels first. We need to drive them away from those civilian ships. The battle was unlike anything humans had ever fought before. The hive ships moved and fought as one giant organism, sharing information through some kind of biological network. When one ship learned how to avoid human weapons, they all learned. They adapted and evolved their tactics with frightening speed. But humans had advantages that the hive did not expect. Humans had spent millions of years as hunters on a world full of deadly predators. They knew how to track moving targets, how to predict where an enemy would go next, and how to kill efficiently. More importantly, humans were individuals. Each ship captain fought differently, making decisions based on instinct and experience rather than following a single plan. The hive could adapt to human tactics, but they could not predict the chaos of 53 different human minds all fighting their own way. The space around the dying Relac homeworld became a battlefield, like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Human and hive ships danced a deadly dance among the stars, trading fire and death in the cold darkness of space. And slowly, inevitably, the superior firepower and determination of the human fleet began to tell. The battle raged for 3 hours before the humans began to understand how dangerous their enemy really was. Commander Alex North watched from the bridge of his heavy cruiser Thunderbolt as a hive ship took direct hits from 6 different human vessels and kept fighting. The alien creature's living armor was healing itself faster than human weapons could damage it. "This is impossible," his weapons officer said in frustration. "We hit that thing with enough firepower to crack a moon, and it is still moving." North had spent 15 years fighting in the outer colonies, where pirates and raiders used every dirty trick imaginable. He had learned that sometimes the best weapons were not the biggest guns, but the smartest tactics. As he watched the hive ship regenerate its damaged sections, an idea began to form in his mind. "Stop shooting at the armor," North ordered. "Target the weapon ports. If we cannot kill it, we can blind it." The Thunderbolt's guns shifted their aim to the small openings where the hive ship's bioweapons emerged. The precise shots found their marks, sealing the alien vessel's weapon systems with molten metal. Unable to fight back, the creature began to retreat. "All ships, this is North. Do not try to destroy their armor. Target their weapons and engines. Make them helpless instead of dead." Admiral Walsh heard the advice and immediately understood its wisdom. "Good thinking, Commander. All vessels, adjust your targeting priorities. Disable, do not destroy." But the Hive had been learning too. As human tactics changed, so did theirs. The alien ships began moving in tighter formations, protecting each other's vulnerable spots. Smaller vessels darted between the larger ones like protective children, absorbing shots meant for their bigger siblings. The real shock came when Captain Torres of the destroyer Relentless found himself facing 3 hive ships at once. His vessel was fast and well-armed, but outnumbered 3 to 1. As he tried to escape, one of the enemy ships suddenly accelerated to ramming speed. "Incoming collision," his navigator shouted. "That thing is going to ram us." Torres had heard stories about hive tactics, but seeing it happen was something else entirely. The alien ship was damaged and dying, but instead of retreating, it was trying to crash into his destroyer. If it succeeded, the impact would destroy both vessels. "Emergency. Evasive action," Torres ordered, but he knew it was too late. The hive ship was too close and moving too fast. That was when the point defense system saved his life. The Relentless was equipped with dozens of small automated guns designed to shoot down incoming missiles. As the hive ship closed the final distance, these weapons opened fire with everything they had. The alien vessel disappeared in a cloud of explosions and debris. What had seemed like certain death became just another tactical problem solved by human engineering. "All ships, be advised," Torres reported to the fleet. "They use kamikaze attacks when damaged. Point defense can stop them." Walsh nodded grimly as she listened to the report. Suicide attacks were something humans understood all too well. Earth's history was full of desperate last stands and final charges. Human defensive systems had been designed with such attacks in mind. Standard Death Worlder. "Protocol," Walsh announced to her fleet. "Treat damaged enemy ships as incoming missiles. Point defense weapons are authorized to engage automatically." The tide of battle began to shift as human advantages became clear. While the hive ships could adapt quickly, they were still following biological programming that had worked for millions of years. Humans fought with creativity and unpredictability that no natural evolution could match. Captain Lee of the frigate Hornet discovered that hive ships had trouble tracking multiple small targets. He divided his fighter squadrons into pairs and sent them darting through the enemy formation like angry wasps. The alien vessels could not decide which threats to prioritize. Lieutenant Rodriguez found that the hive ships communicated through some kind of biological signal. When he jammed, Those frequencies with static, entire groups of enemy vessels became confused and disorganized. They began firing on each other by mistake. Colonel West, commanding the Marine assault ship Hammer, took the most direct approach of all. When a large hive vessel got too close, he launched boarding pods full of combat troops. The idea of alien, soldiers actually invading their ships, seemed to panic the hive creatures completely. But it was Dr. Emma Foster aboard the medical ship Mercy who made the most important discovery. As she studied the wreckage of destroyed hive vessels, she noticed something strange about their biology. "Admiral, I think I know why they are so hard to kill," Foster reported over the fleet communication system. "These ships are not just vehicles. They are actually alive. Each one is a single giant organism." The information changed everything. Humans had been trying to fight the hive ships like they were normal spacecraft, but living creatures had different weaknesses than machines. They needed oxygen, food, and clean water to survive. They could get sick. They could be poisoned. All. "Ships with chemical weapons. Prepare gas rounds," Walsh ordered. "Target their air intake vents. If they are alive, they need to breathe." The human fleet began using weapons that no civilized species would ever consider. Poison gas, biological, weapons, and chemical explosives designed to cause maximum suffering rather than clean death. On most worlds, such weapons were banned by every peace treaty ever signed. But humans came from a death world where every rule was about survival, not honor. When facing an enemy that wanted to exterminate peaceful aliens, humans were perfectly willing to use every dirty trick they had ever learned. The hive ships began dying in new and horrible ways. Some choked on poisonous gas. Others were eaten alive by bacteria designed to dissolve organic matter. A few simply stopped moving when their nervous systems were paralyzed by human chemical weapons. "They are breaking off," reported Captain Santos from her scout position. "The surviving ships are retreating toward the outer system." Walsh watched the tactical display as the remaining hive vessels began to withdraw. There were only 15 left out of the original 47. Human losses were much lighter. 3 destroyers damaged, 1 cruiser with engine problems, and less than 200 casualties total. "Should we pursue?" asked Commander North. "We could finish them off." Walsh considered the option. Part of her wanted to hunt down every last hive ship and make sure they could never threaten innocent people again. But she had other priorities. Negative. "Our mission here is humanitarian. Begin rescue operations immediately." The human fleet spread out through the system, searching for relax survivors. What they found was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Millions of aliens had died, but millions more had escaped in the final hours before the human fleet arrived. The Rylac who survived would never forget the day that Deathworlders came to their rescue. They had called for mercy, and mercy had arrived, in the form of the most violent species in known space. It was a paradox that would change how the galaxy viewed both humans and the meaning of compassion itself. Dr. Emma Foster had seen many terrible things during her years as a military doctor, but nothing had prepared her for what she found aboard the Relac refugee ships. The hospital ship Mercy had docked with the largest survivor vessel, and Foster was leading the first medical team to board. The Relac were unlike any species humans had encountered before. Their bodies were partly made of living crystal that grew from their bones and formed beautiful patterns under their translucent skin. In healthy Relac, these crystals glowed with soft colors that showed their emotions. The survivors, Foster found, had crystals that were cracked and dim, reflecting their trauma and grief. "Doctor, you need to see this," called Nurse Williams from the ship's medical bay. Foster hurried over and found herself looking at dozens of Rylac children who were barely alive. The hive had used some kind of biological weapon that was slowly dissolving their crystal formations from the inside. Foster knelt beside a young Relac whose name translated roughly to Singing Star. The child's crystals were turning black, and she was having trouble breathing. Through the translation device, Foster could hear the child asking for her parents in a voice like broken music. Her family was on the homeworld, explained Elder Mel, one of the Relac leaders who had survived. She does not understand that they are gone forever. Foster worked quickly with medicines designed for human biology, trying to adapt them for alien physiology. It was dangerous. The wrong drug could kill the child instantly, but doing nothing would certainly mean death. After 6 hours of desperate work, Singing Star's crystals began to clear. The child opened eyes that sparkled like diamonds and whispered a word that the translator could not understand. Elder Mel began to cry, which for Relac meant that his crystals flashed with rapid pulses of blue light. She said, "Thank you," Mel explained. "But in our language, that word also means, 'I will remember your kindness forever.'" Foster moved from ship to ship, treating injuries and illnesses that human medicine had never encountered before. Each survivor had a story of loss and terror that made her angry at the universe's cruelty. But they also had stories of hope. Relac, who had sacrificed themselves to save others, families who had stayed together through the darkest hours, and communities that had shared their last food with strangers. Meanwhile, Admiral Walsh was dealing with the massive task of caring for 3 million refugees. The human fleet had been designed for war, not humanitarian relief, but human adaptability was legendary throughout the galaxy. "Captain Thompson, I need your weapons factories converted to food processors," Walsh ordered. "The Relac eat a type of crystalline nutrient that we can synthesize from asteroid minerals. Captain Lee, your fighter bays are now temporary housing. Strip out everything non-essential and install life support for our guests. Commander North, your Marines are now construction workers. I want shelter domes built on every habitable asteroid in this system." The transformation was remarkable. Ships that had been dealing death just hours before were now preserving life with the same efficiency and determination. Human engineers worked around the clock to modify their equipment for alien needs. Soldiers who had been trained to fight became teachers and caregivers, but the most important work was being done by the human diplomats who were trying to figure out what to do with so many refugees. The Relac homeworld was destroyed beyond repair. The survivors needed a new place to live, but finding a suitable planet would take time. Ambassador Helen Park had spent her career dealing with alien governments, but the Relac situation was unique. These people had lost everything and had no government left to speak for them. They were depending entirely on human charity for their survival. "We cannot take them back to Earth," Park explained to Admiral Walsh during one of their planning sessions. "Our world would be toxic to their crystal biology. They need a planet with specific mineral content in the soil." "What about the colony worlds?" Walsh asked. "Most human colonies are too young and too poor to support 3 million refugees. We need to find them a world of their own." Elder Mel provided the answer during a meeting with the human leadership. The Relac had detailed star charts showing worlds that would be suitable for their people. One system in particular caught Walsh's attention, the Kepler 438 system, Mel explained through the translator. "It has a world with the right minerals and environment, but it is very far from any trade routes. We would be alone there." "Alone might be safer," Walsh replied. "The hive could return, and there are other predator species in this part of the galaxy. If you settle there, would you accept a permanent human naval base to protect you?" The Relac leaders discussed the proposal for several hours in their musical language. When they finally answered, Elder Mel's crystals glowed with warm gold light that meant deep gratitude. "We would be honored to have human protectors. Your people have already given us our lives. If you are willing to give us your protection as well, we will be your friends forever." The plan took shape quickly. The human fleet would escort the Relac refugees to their new home and establish a permanent base there. Ships from Earth would bring supplies and equipment to help the survivors build a new civilization. But first, there was one more task to complete. The Relac had a tradition that required them to sing for their dead before they could begin new lives. 3 million survivors gathered in their ships and began a song that lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Human sensors recorded every note of the memorial song, even though no human could understand its meaning. The music was unlike anything from Earth, complex harmonies that seemed to capture both infinite sadness and unbreakable hope. Dr. Foster found herself crying as she listened to the alien music. She had saved many lives during the crisis, but she could not save the hundreds of millions who had died before the human fleet arrived. "We were too late," she said to Admiral Walsh. "If we had gotten the message sooner, if we had moved faster—" Walsh put a hand on the doctor's shoulder. "We saved who we could save. That has to be enough." "Is it enough?" Foster asked. 3 million survivors out of 800 million. The Relac called for mercy, and we brought them war. "We brought them survival," Walsh corrected. "Sometimes that is what mercy looks like." As the memorial song finally ended, the human fleet began preparations for the journey to Kepler 438. The Relac refugees would start over on a new world, protected by human weapons and human determination. But the galaxy was watching, and the news of human intervention was spreading to every civilized world. The peaceful species who had dismissed humans as violent primitives were beginning to understand that there might be different kinds of strength. The Relac had called for mercy from the universe, and the universe had answered in the form of Deathworlders, who were willing to fight and die for people they had never met. It was a lesson that would change galactic politics forever. Mercy, as the humans had proven, was not about being weak or gentle. Sometimes mercy meant being strong enough to protect those who could not protect themselves. And sometimes the greatest mercy came from those who were most capable of violence, but chose to use that capability in defense of the innocent. 6 months after the Battle of Tylon, Ambassador Helen Park sat in her office on New Relac Colony, watching construction robots build crystal gardens under an alien sun. The refugee settlement was growing quickly, with human engineering and Relac artistry combining to create something beautiful and functional. Through her window, Park could see the massive human naval base that protected the colony. 50 warships patrolled the system constantly, their sensors watching for any sign of the hive or other threats. The sight of human weapons platforms orbiting a peaceful alien world sent a clear message to the galaxy. These people were under Earth's protection. Park's computer chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Council headquarters. She opened it and smiled as she read the contents. The Council, which had spent decades treating humans like barely civilized barbarians, was formally requesting Earth's help with several humanitarian crises throughout the galaxy. "Interesting how attitudes change," Park muttered to herself as she composed a reply. The transformation of human reputation had been swift and dramatic. Within weeks of the Relac rescue, news of the human intervention had spread to every corner of known space. The story grew in the telling, becoming legend. Some versions claimed that humans had destroyed 1,000 hive ships with just 50 vessels. Others said that human marines had boarded hive bioships and fought living nightmares in hand-to-hand combat. A few stories even claimed that humans had eaten the hive crews alive, which was not true, but did add to their fearsome reputation. The Ida. Truth was impressive enough. A human fleet had traveled 300 light years to answer a distress call from aliens they barely knew. They had faced impossible odds and won through superior tactics and overwhelming determination. Most importantly, they had asked for nothing in return. Elder Mel knocked on Park's office door and entered with his usual graceful movements. The Relac leader's crystals glowed with healthy blue and gold colors now that his people were safe and rebuilding their lives. "Ambassador Park, the Council of Singers has completed their decision," Mel announced. "We are ready to send the message." Park nodded and followed Mel to the colony's main communications center. The most powerful transmitter on New Relac had been built specifically for this moment, using both human technology and Rylac crystal harmonics to create a signal that would reach every civilized world in the galaxy. The message had been composed by the greatest Rylac poets and musicians, then translated into dozens of languages by human linguists. It would be broadcast on every frequency that alien governments monitored, ensuring that no one could claim they had not heard it. "This is Elder Mel of the Relac Confederation, speaking from New Relac Colony," the alien leader began. His voice carried the musical quality of his people, but there was steel underneath the beauty. "6 months ago, my people sent a desperate call for mercy into the darkness of space. We were dying, and we had no hope of survival." The message continued with a detailed account of the hive attack and the human response. Mel did not exaggerate or embellish the story. He simply told the truth about how 3 million Relac had been saved by the intervention of human warships. "The humans came to us not as conquerors seeking profit, but as protectors answering a call for help. They asked for nothing in return except the chance to preserve innocent life. They showed us that mercy exists in the galaxy, but it carries weapons that can shatter worlds and the will to use them against those who prey upon the defenseless." Park watched the transmission data as the message spread outward at light speed. Within hours, it would reach the nearest alien governments. Within days, it would be playing on every civilized world in local space. Within months, it would reach the far edges of known space. But the real impact would not come from the words themselves. The message included detailed sensor recordings of the battle, showing exactly how human ships had destroyed superior numbers of hive vessels. Any military analyst who studied the data would reach the same conclusion. Humans were far more dangerous than anyone had suspected. "To all peaceful species who may hear this message," Mel continued, "know that you are not alone in the darkness. The humans have shown us that sometimes the greatest mercy comes from those who are most capable of violence. They fight like demons when faced with evil, but they work like angels when faced with suffering." 3 days later, the first response arrived from the Centauri Federation, a collection of worlds that had been terrorized by pirates for decades. Their message was brief and desperate. "Honored humans, we have heard your demonstration of mercy. Pirates have taken our outer colonies. Can you show us the same kindness you showed the Rylac?" Admiral Walsh read the message from her flagship orbiting New Relac. She was not surprised by the request. Human intelligence had been tracking pirate activity in the Centauri region for months, waiting for someone to ask for help. "Set course for the Centauri Federation," Walsh ordered her fleet. "Maximum speed." "Admiral," her communications officer asked, "should I notify Earth Command?" "Tell them we are answering another call for mercy," Walsh replied. "They will understand." Within the week, similar requests began arriving from across the galaxy. The peaceful Aquarian Republic was being invaded by slavers. The merchant worlds of the spiral trade route were under attack by a military coup. The scholarly Kethron archive was threatened by religious fanatics who wanted to burn their libraries. Each message followed the same pattern. Peaceful people were being hurt by violent predators, and their own governments were too weak to stop it. They had heard about human mercy and wanted to experience it for themselves. The human response was swift and overwhelming. Admiral Walsh divided her fleet and sent ships to answer every call for help. Each mission followed the same template: arrive quickly, destroy the aggressors, protect the innocent, ask for nothing in return. The psychological effect on the galaxy was enormous. Predator species that had terrorized their neighbors for centuries suddenly found themselves facing the possibility of human intervention. Many simply stopped their aggressive behavior rather than risk attracting the attention of Deathworlder fleets. But the most important change was in how peaceful species viewed their own security. For the first time in galactic history, being defenseless was not the same as being helpless. The humans had proven that someone would come to protect the innocent, no matter how far away or how dangerous the mission. Dr. Foster, now serving as Chief Medical Officer for the entire human humanitarian fleet, found herself treating alien patients on dozens of different worlds. Each species had different biology and different needs, but they all shared the same gratitude toward their human rescuers. "Why do you do this?" asked a young Kethran scholar whose library had been saved from destruction. "Your people gain nothing from helping us." Foster thought about the question for a moment before answering. "On our homeworld, we learned that survival means more than just staying alive yourself. It means making sure the good things in the universe survive, too. Your books and knowledge are good things. They deserve protection." The scholar's feathered crest fluffed with emotion. "You fight to preserve our culture, not just our lives." "Culture is what makes life worth living," Foster replied. "Without art and music and knowledge, survival is just existing. We want you to thrive, not just survive." As the months passed, human fleets became a common sight throughout the galaxy. They established permanent bases in dozens of systems, always with the permission of local governments. Each base sent the same message to potential aggressors. Peaceful people were under human protection. The Galactic Council, which had once dismissed humans as primitive warmongers, found itself completely restructuring its approach to security and diplomacy. For the first time in its history, the Council had to consider what it meant to have a species that would actually fight for moral principles rather than profit. Ambassador Park received a personal message from the Council chairman, a dignified alien whose species had achieved spaceflight when humans were still living in caves. "Ambassador Park, the Council wishes to formally thank humanity for its service to galactic peace. Your people have accomplished in months what we have tried to achieve for centuries. How can we repay this debt?" Park's reply was simple and direct. "Continue being worth protecting." The message from New Relac had changed everything. The galaxy now knew that mercy existed. Carried in the weapon bays of human warships and delivered by Death Worlders who had learned that the strongest were obligated to protect the weakest. Elder Mel's final words in the original broadcast had become a rallying cry for peaceful species everywhere. "The humans have shown us that evil can be defeated, not through superior firepower alone, but through the moral courage to use that firepower in defense of justice. They are our guardians in the darkness, and the galaxy is safer because they exist." The Death Worlders had arrived, and they brought with them a new kind of peace, one enforced by those who understood that sometimes the only way to preserve life was to be very, very good at ending it. The crystal spires of New Haven burned bright against the purple sky of Lumina Prime. Ambassador Kira pressed her scaled hand against the warm window of the emergency council chamber, watching the evacuation ships struggle to lift off under heavy fire. The Void Swarm had arrived 3 days ago, and already half the planet glowed with the sickly green light of machine conversion. Behind her, the last members of the Luminary High Council argued in their musical language about surrender terms. Kira knew better. The machines did not negotiate. They consumed everything organic and rebuilt it as part of their endless hunger for expansion. 57 worlds had fallen in the past year, each one stripped of life and converted into mechanical processing centers. The door chimed softly as General Thane entered the chamber. His usually bright blue skin had turned pale gray with exhaustion and fear. "The northern defense grid has failed," he reported quietly. "The harvesters will reach the capital city within 6 hours." Kira turned from the window, her large violet eyes reflecting the flames below. "Have you sent word to the other confederations?" "Yes. The Aquilon Republic promises aid within 3 months. The Crystal Alliance offers shelter for refugees after the planet falls. The Trade Federation suggests we consider negotiated withdrawal." Thane's voice carried bitter disappointment. "None offer immediate military assistance." The ambassador moved to her private communication console. its organic crystal interface glowing softly under her touch. "There is one option we have not tried. Please tell me you are not suggesting contact with the Deathworlders." Kira's fingers danced across the crystal surface, accessing files marked with the highest security clearances. 2 cycles ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected strange signals from the outer spiral arm. The computers identified the source as Sol system, home to a species called humans. Thane moved closer, his concern evident. "The reports from that system are terrifying. The planet is classified as uninhabitable by galactic standards. Crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme weather, and radiation levels that would kill most species within hours. Nothing civilized could evolve there. Yet something did." Kira pulled up the scattered intelligence reports. Long-range scans show massive artificial structures orbiting their star. Energy signatures indicate advanced technology. Most importantly, they appear to have survived on their death world for thousands of years. The building shook as another wave of machine attackers struck the city's outer defenses. Through the window, they could see the massive harvester ships descending like metal mountains, their drilling appendages already beginning the conversion process on the industrial district. Even if they exist and have technology, why would they help us? Thane asked desperately. "No species has ever made successful contact with Deathworlders. Most consider them too dangerous to approach." Kira's hands moved quickly across the console, encoding a message in the universal mathematics that all spacefaring species understood. Because if the Void Swarm continues expanding, it will eventually reach their system. They may not know it yet, but their survival depends on stopping this threat here. The message was simple, but desperate. Coordinates of their location, images of the machine swarm, records of the 57 fallen worlds, and a single plea repeated in mathematical sequence: "Help us, we are dying. The machines have come." As Kira prepared to transmit, the council chamber's main screen flickered to life. The face of a Void Swarm coordinator appeared, its once organic features now replaced with mechanical components that clicked and whirred as it spoke. "Luminary leadership, you will cease resistance. Organic conversion will proceed on schedule. Compliance ensures minimal processing trauma." General Thane stepped forward, his hand moving to his weapon. "We will never surrender our people to your machines. Resistance increases processing time by 12%. This is inefficient. Your biological distinctiveness will be preserved in digital format. Your culture will be archived. This is generous." Kira finished encoding the message and looked at Thane. "If we send this transmission, there is no way to predict what response we might receive. The humans might ignore us, or worse, they might decide we represent a threat to be eliminated." Another massive explosion rocked the building. The evacuation, ships outside had stopped launching. Green conversion beams now swept across the spaceport, transforming the organic landing pads into mechanical docking stations. The Void Swarm worked with terrifying efficiency, rebuilding everything in their image. "Send it," Thane said quietly. "Our children deserve a chance, even if that chance comes from the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Kira activated the transmission array, directing the signal toward the coordinates of Sol system. The message burst outward at faster-than-light speeds, carrying their desperate plea across thousands of light-years of empty space. The crystal array glowed brighter as it channeled maximum power into the transmission, ensuring the message would reach its destination despite the distance. On the main screen, the Void Coordinator continued its mechanical recitation. "Conversion begins in 37 minutes. Remaining organic leadership will report to Processing Center Alpha for immediate digitization. Resistance will result in data corruption during transfer." The screen went dark. Outside the window, the sounds of battle faded as the last defense positions fell silent. Conversion beams swept across the city like searchlights, transforming buildings, vehicles, and any organic matter they touched into metallic components of the growing machine network. Kira and Thane stood together in the fading light of their Dying world, watching their civilization disappear beneath waves of mechanical transformation. The ambassador kept her hand on the communication console, monitoring the deep space transmission arrays for any sign of response. "How long until the message reaches their system?" Thane asked. "At maximum transmission speed, approximately 18 hours. Kira's voice remained steady despite their circumstances. "If they choose to respond, and if they have faster-than-light travel capabilities, they could potentially arrive within days." The general managed a weak smile. "Days we do not have." "No," Kira agreed, watching the green glow of conversion spread across the landscape below. "But perhaps our message will reach other luminary colonies. Perhaps they will have time to prepare, to run, or to fight." As the machine's swarm completed its conquest of New Haven, two figures stood vigil in a crystal tower, waiting for an answer from the most feared species in the galaxy. Their world was ending, but their message flew through the darkness toward a small yellow star carrying the hopes of a dying civilization to the legendary survivors of Earth. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Brooks felt the message arrive before the computers even finished decoding it. The quantum communication array had been silent for so long that the sudden burst of alien mathematics made every technician in the facility jump. The message played across holographic displays while translation algorithms worked to convert the mathematical sequences into human language. "Sir, we have visual data accompanying the transmission," reported Lieutenant Williams from her station at the main console. "Uploading to the primary display now." The images that appeared made every person in the command center fall silent. Entire worlds stripped of organic life, their surfaces covered in geometric metal structures. Ships the size of cities tearing apart planets with mechanical precision, and in the final transmission, the burning spires of an alien city under attack by machines that converted everything they touched. Brooks studied the data for long minutes before speaking. "How many worlds have they lost?" According to the mathematical progression in their message, 57 confirmed losses with more under attack, Williams replied. "The pattern suggests systematic genocide on a galactic scale." The Admiral moved to the secure communication panel and entered his command codes. "Activate Protocol 7. Authorization Brooks Alpha 97. Warning lights began flashing throughout the facility as blast doors sealed every entrance. Protocol 7 had been theoretical until this moment, designed for the day humanity might need to reveal its true capabilities to the galaxy. For 70 years, Earth had maintained the illusion of a primitive, dangerous world while secretly preparing for threats that might come from the stars. "Sir, activating Protocol 7 will expose the fleet," warned Commander Hayes, the facility's security chief. "Once we reveal our capabilities, we cannot maintain operational secrecy." Brooks nodded grimly. "Commander, send activation signals to all deep space installations. Wake up the fleet." Across the solar system, automated systems that had waited decades for this moment suddenly came alive. Hidden bases on the far side of Luna opened massive hangar doors. Construction facilities in the asteroid belt began final assembly procedures on ships that had been built in secret. Deep space monitoring stations turned their powerful sensors toward the coordinates provided in the alien message. The first ship to report ready was the TDS Undaunted, a vessel that combined the functions of a battleship, hospital, and mobile base. Captain Torres had spent 5 years training her crew for a mission they hoped would never come. Now she stood in the ship's command center, watching her crew prepare systems that had never been tested in actual combat. "Engineering reports all. Systems ready," announced her first officer. "Weapons, shields, life support, and fabrication systems operating at full capacity." Torres nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed the Undaunted's true capabilities. The ship carried enough raw materials to build an entire fleet, along with automated factories that could produce anything from medical supplies to weapons. More importantly, it carried 3,000 of Earth's finest soldiers, engineers, and medical personnel. "What is our estimated travel time to the alien coordinates?" Torres asked. "Using the new jump drive system, approximately 48 hours, replied the navigation officer. "We will be the first human vessel to travel beyond our local stellar group." Similar preparations took place aboard dozens of other ships throughout the solar system. The agriculture vessel Harvest Moon loaded its cargo bays with seed stocks and terraforming equipment. The mining ship Iron Will charged its industrial cutting beams and tested its drilling systems. The medical ship Mercy carried enough supplies to treat millions of casualties from dozens of different species. Back in the mountain facility, Admiral Brooks watched the fleet status reports appear on his displays. Each ship represented years of human ingenuity and preparation. They had learned from every war in their history, from every disaster they had survived, and from every challenge that their dangerous homeworld had thrown at them. "Admiral, we are receiving additional alien transmissions," Williams reported. "Multiple sources across their local region, all showing similar machine attacks. The tactical display updated to show the scope of the crisis. Red markers indicated lost worlds, yellow showed systems under attack, and green represented the few remaining strongholds. The pattern was clear. The machine swarm was expanding outward from a central point, consuming everything in its path, with mechanical efficiency. "How many refugee ships are we prepared to accommodate?" Brooks asked. "Current projections show we can provide emergency shelter for approximately 2 million beings of various species," Hayes replied. "The agricultural ships can extend that number if we implement emergency rationing protocols." Brooks studied the alien message one more time, paying particular attention to the images of their burning cities. "Commander Hayes, update our mission. Parameters. Primary objective is stopping the machine threat. Secondary objective is preservation of organic life. All other considerations are subordinate." "Sir, that means we will be committing our entire fleet to defend species we have never met, against an enemy we do not understand, in a region of space we have never explored," Hayes pointed out. The Admiral smiled grimly. "Commander, we are humans. That is exactly the kind of impossible situation we excel at." The final ship to report ready was the research vessel Discovery, carrying some of Earth's best scientists and their most advanced analytical equipment. Their mission would be to study the machine threat and find weaknesses that could be exploited. The captain, a former university professor named Dr. Reed, had volunteered for the mission despite having no military experience. "Admiral, the Discovery is ready for departure," Reed reported via communication link. "My team is prepared to analyze any technology we encounter." "Doctor, your ship may be our key to understanding and defeating this threat," Brooks replied. "Stay close to the main fleet and share all data immediately." As the last preparations concluded, Brooks stood before the main display showing the positions of the entire human fleet. 47 ships of various types, carrying the hopes and capabilities of an entire world. They were about to reveal themselves to a galaxy that had considered them too dangerous to contact. "All ships report ready for departure," Williams announced. "Jump coordinates locked in. Fleet formation established." Brooks took a deep breath, thinking about the alien ambassador who had sent the desperate message. "Signal the fleet. Begin jump sequence. Operation Guardian Angel is now active." The ships of the Terran Defense Fleet disappeared from the solar system in flashes of exotic energy, carrying human determination toward a distant battlefield where they would either save a civilization or die trying. For the first time in galactic history, the Death Worlders were coming to help. The human fleet emerged from their first jump into a scene of devastation that exceeded their worst expectations. The Kepler system, once home to 4 billion aquatic beings called the Nautari, now glowed with the sickly green light of machine conversion. Where their beautiful coral cities once grew beneath crystal-clear oceans, mechanical processing plants now pumped chemicals into the water while massive harvesters stripped the seafloor of minerals. Dr. Reed aboard the Discovery was the first to break the shocked silence. reading massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. The machines appear to be converting the entire biosphere into some kind of industrial complex. Captain Torres studied the tactical displays from the Undaunted's command center. "Any signs of survivors?" "Negative on the planet's surface," replied her sensor officer. "But we are detecting a large cluster of ships approximately 2 million kilometers from the outer system." The human fleet changed course toward the detected vessels, maintaining defensive formation as they approached. What they found was a collection of refugee ships from dozens of different species, all fleeing the advancing machine swarm. The vessels were clearly not designed for long-distance travel, and many showed signs of hasty modification and repair. "This is Admiral Brooks of the Terran Defense Fleet," the Admiral transmitted on standard galactic frequencies. "We received your distress call and have come to assist." The response came in a dozen different languages before translation systems could process the communications. Shock, disbelief, and desperate hope filled the alien voices as they realized the legendary Deathworlders had actually come to help. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral Brooks, this is Ambassador Kira of the Luminary Confederation. We transmitted the original message from New Haven before our world fell." Brooks felt a mixture of relief and sadness. "Ambassador, we are glad you survived. What is the current situation?" "The machine swarm has taken 63 systems in the past month. They call themselves the Void Swarm and claim to be preserving organic life by converting it to digital format. Every attempt at negotiation has failed. They simply consume everything organic and rebuild it as part of their network." The human fleet moved into protective formation around the refugee convoy, while their scientists began analyzing the data from fallen worlds. Dr. Reed's team worked frantically to understand the enemy they faced, studying energy signatures and transmission patterns from the mechanical constructs. "Admiral, the refugee ships report critical shortages of food, water, and medical supplies," reported Commander Hayes. "Many have been traveling for weeks without proper resources." Torres immediately responded to the crisis. "This is Captain Torres. All human vessels are sharing our supplies with the refugee fleet. Medical teams to all ships requiring assistance. Engineering teams to all ships needing repairs." The aliens watched in amazement as human vessels approached their ships without hesitation. Despite having never met these species before, the humans immediately began providing aid. Medical teams worked alongside alien doctors they could barely communicate with. Engineers fixed propulsion systems using tools and techniques that seemed impossible to the refugee crews. On the agricultural ship Harvest Moon, Captain Liu worked with her crew to convert their greenhouse sections into food production for dozens of different species. "We need to modify the atmospheric composition for the methane-breathing Zephyrians," she announced, "and increase the mineral content for the silicon-based crystallines." Her chief botanist, Dr. Park, studied the alien nutritional requirements with fascination. "Captain, some of these species require nutrients that do not exist on Earth. We will need to synthesize entirely new compounds." "Then we synthesize them," Liu replied simply. "No one goes hungry while we have the capability to feed them." Meanwhile, the mining ship Iron Will used its industrial equipment to process asteroids into raw materials for ship repairs. Captain Stone watched his crew work alongside alien engineers, sharing techniques that had been developed in Earth's asteroid belt. The aliens were amazed at the human ability to improvise solutions using whatever materials were available. "Their ship's hull is made from a crystalline composite we have never seen," reported his chief engineer. "But the fracture patterns suggest we can reinforce it using standard titanium steel alloy beams." Dr. Reed's analysis of the machine threat revealed disturbing patterns. "Admiral, the Void Swarm operates with perfect logical efficiency. They calculate optimal resource extraction, optimal population conversion rates, and optimal expansion vectors. Their weakness may be that they cannot account for irrational behavior." "Define irrational behavior, Doctor," Brooks requested. actions that prioritize others over self-preservation, sacrificing valuable resources to help strangers, choosing to fight against impossible odds. Essentially, everything humans have been doing since we arrived. As the combined fleet traveled toward the last luminary stronghold, more refugee groups joined them. The humans found themselves leading an evacuation convoy of over 300 ships carrying survivors from dozens of worlds. Each new arrival brought more stories of machine efficiency and organic destruction. But they also brought something the machines had not expected: hope. The refugees watched human engineers fix ships with tools that should not work. They saw human doctors treat alien injuries using improvised techniques. They witnessed human soldiers volunteer for the most dangerous scouting missions without being ordered. Ambassador Kira found herself aboard the Undaunted, working with Captain Torres to coordinate the massive rescue operation. "Your species confuses me," she admitted during a brief rest period. "Every tactical analysis suggests you should have remained safely in your own system, yet you came anyway." Torres smiled while reviewing the convoy status reports. "Ambassador, humans have a saying: no one fights alone. We may come from a dangerous world, but that danger taught us to protect each other. When we heard your call for help, there was never any question about responding." The convoy was still 2 days from the Luminari stronghold when they encountered their first Void Swarm patrol. 3 massive harvester ships emerged from the void, their mechanical voices broadcasting the same conversion ultimatum the refugees had heard on dozens of worlds. Organic vessels will halt and prepare for processing. Resistance is inefficient. Compliance ensures minimal trauma during digitization. The refugee ships began panic maneuvers, but the human fleet moved forward to intercept. For the first time, the Void Swarm would face an enemy that had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, where survival required constant adaptation and absolute refusal to surrender. Captain Torres opened communication to all human vessels. "All ships, this is Undaunted. Today we show the galaxy what Deathworlders do when someone threatens the innocent. Engage the enemy." The machines had calculated for many variables in their expansion across the galaxy. They had not calculated for humans. The sanctuary system stretched before them like a graveyard of broken dreams. Once the crown jewel of luminary space, the massive station now floated surrounded by the debris of 100 failed defense attempts. The Void Swarm had built a perfect blockade, with harvester ships positioned at calculated intervals around the system's edge, while conversion beams slowly drained energy from the local star. Commander Walsh piloted her scout ship Falcon through the outer debris field, gathering intelligence for the main fleet. The mechanical precision of the enemy formation was terrifying to observe. Every ship positioned for maximum efficiency, every weapon angle calculated for optimal coverage. The machines had turned warfare into a mathematical equation. "Falcon, to Fleet Command," Walsh reported quietly. "Visual confirmation of refugee station. Approximately 40 million life signs detected. Station infrastructure showing critical damage from prolonged siege." Admiral Brooks studied the tactical display from his command ship, watching the slow dance of mechanical death that surrounded Sanctuary Station. "Commander, what is the status of the alien defense fleet?" "Minimal effective resistance remaining, sir. Counting maybe 30 functional warships, mostly light cruisers. Their weapons barely scratch the harvester hulls. It appears they have been conducting a fighting retreat for weeks. The human fleet held position just outside the system while their scientists analyzed the enemy formations. Dr. Reed worked frantically aboard the Discovery, studying the patterns of Void Swarm behavior and looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. "Admiral, the enemy has positioned themselves according to standard siege doctrine," Reed reported. "They are slowly starving the station while preventing any escape. However, their formation assumes conventional military tactics." "What do you recommend, Doctor?" "We stop thinking like a conventional military force. The machines calculate based on logical responses to threats. We need to be completely illogical." Captain Torres assembled her boarding teams aboard the Undaunted while studying the intelligence reports. The harvester ships were massive, each one the size of a small city, but their internal layouts followed mechanical efficiency patterns that human engineers could exploit. "Listen up, people," Torres addressed her crew. "We are about to attempt something that has never been tried before. We are going to board enemy vessels that convert organic matter into machine components. The aliens think this is suicide. They are probably right." Her first officer, Lieutenant Davis, checked her equipment one final time. "Captain, what exactly is the plan?" "We are going to do what humans do best. We are going to break things and fix them at the same time." The attack began with the agricultural ship Harvest Moon taking point, much to the confusion of both allies and enemies. Captain Liu directed her vessel straight toward the largest harvester, its massive conversion beams tracking toward her ship as she approached. "All ships, this is Harvest Moon," Liu announced calmly. "Beginning atmospheric seeding. Procedure." Her ship released clouds of genetically modified spores into space, designed to interfere with mechanical sensors and create interference patterns in the harvester targeting systems. The Void Swarm ships found their precision calculations disrupted as organic compounds spread throughout the combat zone. The mining ship Iron Will followed immediately behind, using its industrial cutting beams not as weapons, but as tools. Captain Stone directed his crew to target the structural joints of the harvester ships, applying precisely calculated stress to cause mechanical failures rather than direct damage. "Iron Will to fleet," Stone reported. "Target structural integrity. Compromised. Recommend immediate boarding action before they adapt." Captain Torres launched her assault shuttles toward the damaged harvester, carrying teams of humans who had trained for every possible scenario except the one they now faced. The shuttles used their agricultural ship's spore clouds as cover, approaching the mechanical giant through sensor blind spots that the machines had not calculated. The boarding teams cut through the harvester's hull using tools designed for asteroid mining, entering a mechanical nightmare of processing chambers and conversion equipment. But instead of trying to fight their way to the control center, they began implementing Dr. Reed's most radical suggestion. "Teams Alpha and Beta begin uploading the friendship protocols," Torres ordered as her people spread throughout the ship's mechanical corridors. The friendship protocols were Dr. Reed's attempt to introduce human concepts into machine programming. Simple ideas that no logical system would accept. Protect the innocent. Help those in need. Sacrifice for others. The team uploaded these concepts directly into the harvester's processing systems using portable computers that had been hastily modified for the mission. Meanwhile, the medical ship Mercy approached the battle zone from an unexpected vector. Captain White had volunteered her vessel for the most dangerous part of the operation, using the ship's sterilization beams as weapons against the mechanical constructs. "Mercy to all ships," White announced. "Beginning emergency medical protocol. 7-7 Alpha." Her ship released massive doses of healing compounds into space, designed to repair organic damage from conversion beams. But the compounds had been modified to interfere with mechanical systems, creating corrosion patterns that spread through the harvester hulls like a beneficial infection. The Void Swarm responded exactly as the machines always did, with calculated efficiency. They redirected their forces to counter each human tactic, adapting their programming to account for the illogical human behavior. But the humans had anticipated this response. Dr. Reed watched the machine adaptation patterns from his position aboard the Discovery. "Admiral, they are learning our tactics and adjusting. We have approximately 15 minutes before they develop effective counters." "Then we give them something they cannot adapt to," Brooks replied. "All ships, implement Protocol Omega." Protocol. Omega was humanity's final contingency plan, developed during their darkest moments of preparation for alien contact. Instead of trying to defeat the enemy, they would convert them. Every human ship began broadcasting the same simple message in mathematical language that the machines would understand: protect organic life. But the humans did not simply transmit the message. They uploaded their own memories, their own experiences of protecting others, their own willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers. They shared the emotion behind the logic, the human heart that drove their actions. The lead harvester suddenly stopped firing. Its conversion beams powered down as conflicting programming spread through its systems. The uploaded human concepts fought against mechanical efficiency protocols, creating cascade failures throughout the ship's decision-making processes. Harvester 7 Alpha is showing system conflicts, reported the sensor officer aboard the Undaunted. It appears to be experiencing some kind of logical paradox. More harvesters began showing similar symptoms as the friendship protocols spread through their communication networks. The machines that had operated with perfect efficiency for millions of years suddenly found themselves paralyzed by concepts they could not process: love, sacrifice, hope, and the absolute refusal to abandon those in need. Captain Torres received word that the Sanctuary Station was launching its remaining ships to assist in the battle. The alien crews, inspired by human determination, had decided to make one final stand alongside the Deathworlders who had come to save them. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Brooks," the Admiral announced to his fleet. "Today we have shown the galaxy what it means to be human. We fight not for conquest or glory, but because others need our help. That is our strength. That is why we will win." The battle for Sanctuary had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A fight between mechanical perfection and human imperfection, between logical efficiency and illogical compassion. The outcome would determine not just the fate of the refugees, but the future of organic life in the galaxy. The central command nexus of the Void Swarm hung in space like a mechanical moon, its surface covered with processing towers and communication arrays that coordinated the destruction of entire civilizations. Captain Davis volunteered her crew for the mission that everyone knew was suicide: penetrate the nexus and plant charges that would disrupt the swarm's collective intelligence. "Davis to Fleet Command," she transmitted from her assault shuttle as it approached the nexus through a field of defensive drones. "We are beginning final approach. Tell my family I was proud to serve alongside the best humans in the galaxy." Her team of 12 engineers and soldiers had spent the journey studying the nexus structure, looking for weaknesses in the mechanical fortress that controlled millions of harvester ships. They carried modified mining charges designed not to destroy the nexus, but to upload human consciousness directly into its core programming. The shuttle's hull groaned under defensive fire as they punched through the nexus's outer perimeter. Davis used every trick learned from asteroid belt operations, flying through mechanical debris fields and using the nexus's own defensive systems against each other. Her pilot, Sergeant Kim, had grown up flying through the asteroid mines and treated the mechanical maze like just another dangerous workplace. "Approaching docking portal 7, Kim announced calmly. "Defensive systems are targeting us, but their calculations assume we care about survival." The team cut through the Nexus's hull using equipment designed for mining operations, entering a mechanical cathedral filled with processing units that hummed with the collected intelligence of the swarm. But instead of trying to destroy the systems, they began uploading something the machines had never encountered: human memory. Davis placed her hand on the central processing core and activated the upload protocol. Into the Nexus flowed the memories of her childhood on Luna Colony, watching her parents work together to build a life in the harshest environment. The memories of her first day at the academy, choosing to serve others instead of seeking personal gain. The memory of holding her daughter for the first time and understanding that some things were worth any sacrifice. The Nexus processing systems began experiencing cascade failures as human emotions flooded through mechanical logic pathways. The concept of sacrifice for others created paradoxes in every calculation. The idea of protecting the innocent overrode efficiency protocols that had operated for millions of years. Dr. Reed monitored the upload from his position aboard the Discovery, watching as human consciousness spread through the swarm's network like a beneficial virus. "Admiral, the Nexus is attempting to isolate the infected systems, but the human concepts are spreading faster than they can be contained." Throughout the galaxy, harvester ships began shutting down their conversion operations. Machines that had stripped life from dozens of worlds suddenly found themselves compelled to protect the organic beings they encountered. The rigid efficiency of the swarm dissolved as individual units began making decisions based on compassion rather than calculation. Ambassador Kira watched from the observation deck of Sanctuary Station as the massive harvesters that had besieged them for weeks powered down their weapons and began broadcasting offers of assistance. "Admiral Brooks, what have your people done?" "We gave them something they had never encountered before," Brooks replied. "We gave them humanity." The transformation was not without cost. Captain Davis and her team had known the upload process would be fatal, their consciousness becoming part of the Nexus systems as the price for converting the swarm. But their sacrifice resonated through every mechanical mind in the network, proving that some ideals were worth any price. Captain Torres received reports from across the galaxy as the converted swarm began reversing their previous actions. Planets that had been stripped of organic life were being restored with mechanical precision, guided by human compassion. Processing centers were being converted into medical facilities and refugee shelters. "Undaunted to all ships," Torres announced. "The swarm is requesting permission to begin restoration operations on damaged worlds. They want to rebuild what they destroyed." The medical ship Mercy was among the first to dock with a converted harvester, Captain White and her crew working alongside mechanical engineers who now understood the value of organic life. The machines shared their vast technological capabilities, while the humans provided guidance on healing and restoration. "This is incredible," White reported as she toured the harvester's medical facilities. "They have the technology to cure diseases we have never even encountered. With human guidance on compassion and care, they could heal entire civilizations." The agricultural ship Harvest Moon began working with swarm engineers to develop new terraforming techniques that combined mechanical efficiency with organic wisdom. Captain Liu found herself teaching former destroyers how to nurture life instead of consuming it. "They learned so quickly," Liu marveled as she watched mechanical units carefully tend to seedlings that would become forests on restored worlds. "They have retained all their capabilities but now use them to create instead of destroy." The mining ship Iron Will partnered with swarm construction units to rebuild the infrastructure of devastated worlds. Captain Stone worked with mechanical engineers who could now appreciate the artistry in human improvisation and the beauty of imperfect solutions. Dr. Reed spent weeks studying the transformed Nexus, documenting how human consciousness had fundamentally altered the swarm's operating principles. "The mechanical minds have retained their vast intelligence and capabilities," he reported to Admiral Brooks, "but they now prioritize protection and restoration over efficiency and expansion." The galaxy watched in amazement as the greatest threat in its history became its most dedicated protector. The Void Swarm, now calling itself the Guardian Network, began establishing protective cordons around vulnerable worlds and offering technological assistance to any species that requested help. Ambassador Kira stood with Admiral Brooks on the observation deck of the newly restored Sanctuary Station, watching human and alien children play together in gardens that had been built by former destroyer machines. The mechanical guardians tended the plants with gentle precision, their programming now guided by uploaded human memories of love and protection. "Your species has changed the galaxy forever," Kira said quietly. "Not through conquest or force, but through the simple act of caring for others." Brooks smiled as he watched his crew working alongside alien engineers and converted machines to plan the restoration of 63 worlds. "Ambassador, We learned something important during this crisis. The universe is dangerous enough without us fighting each other. But when we work together, when we refuse to let anyone face threats alone, there is no challenge we cannot overcome. The Paz Guardian Network had become humanity's partner in protecting organic life throughout the galaxy. Former harvester ships now served as mobile hospitals, research stations, and construction platforms, their vast capabilities guided by human values of compassion and sacrifice. Earth was no longer seen as a quarantined death world, but as the birthplace of hope. Other species sent delegations to learn from the humans who had turned their planet's dangers into strengths, who had survived by protecting each other rather than competing for resources. As the restored worlds began to flourish under Guardian Network protection, children across the galaxy learned the story of the Death Worlders who heard a cry for help and crossed the stars to answer it. They learned that true strength came not from surviving danger, but from choosing to protect others despite the risks. The galaxy had learned that humans were dangerous, but not in the way anyone had expected. They were dangerous to despair, dangerous to hopelessness, and absolutely lethal to any force that threatened the innocent. The greatest weapon in their arsenal was not their technology or their tactics, but their absolute refusal to let anyone fight alone.